I'm going to do the recording now. So we have this on record. So I'm going to do a very quick sharing right now. So can everybody see my screen? Is this doing work? Okay. I assume it's okay. It's okay, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll just give a very quick overview of Hong Kong and its cultural diversity status before we start the sharing by the book. So for those of you who are not familiar with Encompass, we are a social enterprise. We work on this UN Sustainable Development Goal, and we work with NGOs and different partners like Dear Hong Kong to promote the initiative. Our workshops are very experiential. We have done anything from tours to sustainable coffee to like menstrual cup. So yeah, if you have a good idea on SDG, let me know. So for those of you who are not familiar with SDGs, they are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set by in 2015 by the United Nations, with 169 specific targets to be achieved by 2030. So these goals are designed to be universal, transformative, and integrated. So this SDG came from the Millennium Development Goals. So before the SDG, it was the MDG, but it was saying that the MDG was not very holistic enough. So the SDG is supposed to be more encompassing. And how do we understand these different SDGs? So this is one of my favorite diagrams. It's called the SDG cake. So we have the SDGs for the planet in the bottom. So you have life below water, life on land, climate action, which is related to the environment. And then you have the people SDG, which poverty, well-being, gender equality. And then you have prosperity, which is decent work and economic growth, reducing inequality. And then finally, we have peace and partnership. So in an ideal world, you would settle the environmental needs first and the people needs, and then prosperity, and then finally you have peace and partnership. But we all know that we live in a less than ideal world now, and I can see in the polling, some of you said that Hong Kong may not be that a culturally inclusive place, and there might be some discrimination. So how is this cultural diversity related to the SDG? So actually, one of the SDG target 10.2, which is reduce inequality, is said that we should empower and promote inclusion of people irrespective of the age, sex, disability, race, and ethnicity. But in Hong Kong, we have different issues that prevent us to have true inclusion. So I will show you why very shortly. So just very quickly about Hong Kong, we are called the Asia's World City. Oh, there's a typo here, it should be a fusion culture. So about 8% of our permanent residents are not of Chinese descent. So some of you are here are not native Chinese. And where did this ethnicity come from? So if we look at the numbers, we have over, and this is from 2016, we don't have the new census yet. So this is from the last census. And as you can see, we have a large number of non-native Chinese in Hong Kong, and about half of them are actually domestic workers. So how about the rest of them who are not domestic workers? Where are they from? So this is a breakdown from 2016. We can see that we have Filipinos and Indonesians, and most of them are migrant workers, which Zamira from Enrich will talk a little bit more about their status. We also have whites, we have other Asians, we have Nepalese in Hong Kong. And this is where they live. So a lot of them live in the Yau Chim Wong area. A lot of the expat, maybe the more richer one, live in the central and western area. And today, I think Anthony just told me about a quarter of the Lantau population is expats, native Chinese. So you can see there's a large proportion in the islands as well. So Hong Kong, I think if we look at the numbers, we are pretty diverse, but are they really inclusive? I think that's a question, and I think that's a question that Dear Hong Kong also try to explore. Do we have a truly inclusive society here in Hong Kong? We do have ethnic diversity, and this newspaper, this article is in the Hong Kong Free Press, and if you're interested, from Resolve Foundation, they do a lot of social justice work and ethnic diversity work. You can go ahead and read this. as I said, why we don't have, we might have an inclusion issues in Hong Kong is that we have very piecemeal discrimination laws. We also have the issues of migrant worker, refugees, and ethnic minorities. And as some of you pointed out, some of them faces discrimination, and that can be in the workplace, that can be verbal discrimination, that can be non-verbal discrimination. As you might live in Hong Kong, you know, sometimes in Hong Kong, the native Chinese or just people in general are not very nice. If they see people of certain color, they might use certain name. And this picture you see here is actually a protest earlier this year, about last year actually, about the Black Lives Matters and the racism issue in Hong Kong. So with that, I'm going to let the time to Oskar and Aggie to share with you their project and what are their vision behind and what are the challenges in doing this. So pass the time to Oskar and Aggie, the founders of Idea Hong Kong, to do their sharing now.
Okay, thank you very much, Benita. Let me find the slides. Hold
on. Not working yet. Oh, it's working now.
Loading. So yes, we are Hong Kong, and we're a group of people that have been working in a book for 2 years with no other income than the intangible satisfaction of being able to talk to many people in Hong Kong and try to find out what is behind this Asia's World City diversity. So yes, as Benita was saying, it's a very diverse place. Yes, as we can see from the poll and from the news and from the feeling that we have, it's a place where there's some pockets of discrimination in the everyday life, and Benita was mentioning ethnic minorities as an issue. We don't even like the word ethnic minorities. It's a label. It kind of tries to segregate people. It's like, okay, you're different from me, and so I think the reason why we started doing something like this is our core belief that the difference is something that we need to take advantage of. It's something we can learn from. So whenever, at least for me in my background, I was born in Spain, I've been living in other countries, I always felt very comfortable whenever I'm surrounded by people different than me, because I know it's an opportunity to learn from them. And that's not what the majority of people think, especially when things go during bad times. We tend to see people that are different than us, like somebody that is taking our resources, or somebody that we don't understand, or they may be dangerous, or we have many fabricated reasons, and sometimes it's just it comes down to education, that we automatically treat people differently based on gender or the skin color or whatever other reason, right? So we have been working on this project for this time, creating a book with stories. So we believe that the art of storytelling and also photography, so portraits and stories of a person from every different country that lives in Hong Kong. So we have, for this first volume of the book, we have collected 80 stories with, the question was, what is the most inspiring person that we know from a given nationality? And we have chosen a representative from every one of these places, and they end up being very inspiring people, and they have a lot of interesting stories that tied in with Hong Kong, because they have been living here for quite some time. They tied in with their coming countries because we all bring something from our cultures, and also they tied in with some social issues that are happening in Hong Kong. That's the idea about the whole book. The purpose is the social purpose of creating this awareness of cultural diversity in Hong Kong. So our success will not be the number of books that we sell, it will be the number of people that we touch. So in a way, somebody very local that hasn't had exposure to the lives of the international community here, then they can see them, or they can see us as somebody close to them that actually are related to the city and somebody they can learn from. So the final idea is to make the society more tolerant and inclusive. So after the publication of this book, we're going to do a educational guide to bring this book to schools and potentially to be used as the educational material to highlight the stories from everyday people. So we have tried to get the diversity of ages, gender, professions, status, everything. So that's about it. Maybe I can pass it on to Aggie. I realize I haven't really put any of the slides. So this is some snapshots of the book. This is a whole team, so it's a collaborative project. It's part of the team, actually. We're around 50 people. And these are some highlights of some interviews that we made, normally in quiet places, coffee shops. So we enjoyed thoroughly these interviews. One of them was with Zamira. So after the interview, we would set up a photo session in a separate time. This is a fun photo shoot with Christopher Doyle in his studio. And this is with some leaders of different religions that we put together for a photo shoot. And this is when we were printing the book. So maybe I pass it over to Aggie. This is the cover of the book. And we have, this is one of the profiles. So maybe Aggie, you can talk about the people that we interviewed and the variety of profiles and some anecdotes about our interviews.
Okay, so a bit of my a bit of my background. Basically, I'm a Hong Konger. I born and raised in Hong Kong, and then I went to UK for my university. So for my whole life, I studied in a quite good school, and I thought that I actually know a lot of people, and I met some foreigners. So I thought, oh, Hong Kong is very international. But at the same time, when I went to UK and even when I come back to work, I realized that actually there are so many countries or nationalities of people that I've never met, even domestic workers who used to work in my house or with my friends. We never really talk to them or really try to understand or appreciate the culture and the story behind. So when I met Oskar, I realized that we should share these stories to locals, especially to my peers or the younger generation. I believe a lot of expat communities, they already know quite a lot about cultures in Hong Kong and the diversity of Hong Kong, but we feel like there's a need in especially students who they should know more, because back in my school days, I never really learned much about culture. We do talk about discrimination or maybe some ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, but we don't really learn about the religion or like what do we need to understand, or their festival. It's always very shallow. So I think this book is also one of the reasons we want to try to give more authenticity to the person in Hong Kong, and realize that, oh, actually, you look different in Hong Kong. Sometimes you might treat them as expat, but sometimes actually they live longer than you, which happens a lot in the people that we interview. So one of the people who we interview in the book, in the photo, is Dr. Mike, who is a Filipino, but he spent basically all his work, his weekend, to help to develop like a curriculum and a school for domestic workers in Hong Kong. So each year there are more than 300 students from Philippines and Indonesia, sometimes even Nepalese, to go to Hong Kong youth every weekend to learn about different medical knowledge, financial knowledge, just for them to, when they go back to their country, they will be equipped with different skills. Maybe they can start their own company or even a small business. So this is one of the interviewees that we really appreciate, and we never really know about this until we like talk to people. Yeah. Oskar, can you?
This is just a generic.
Okay. Okay. So there's a few more people, let's say, for Mother's Choice. I'm not sure if you know Mother's Choice in Hong Kong is charity which help teenagers who got pregnant. And then I have always thought that is founded by a Hong Konger, or at least a Chinese person. But it's actually founded by co-founded by a American woman who have lived in Hong Kong for more than 30 years. So there's a lot of stories that say people helping Hong Kong homeless people, people dedicated research in physics and atomic. So this is Phyllis. And we have even domestic helpers. In one of the left bottom corner is actually a domestic helper working in Hong Kong, but she's very committed in helping to fighting for domestic rights. So during his off days and also even nighttime, she will be trying to gather helping people to get a counselor and so this is the photo that Oskar is showing. Fighting for rights for domestic workers, trying to get basic pay, to get fair treatment from employees and also from the government. So there are a lot of stories that always touched us, and we really want to show it to the public.
Yeah, and also adding a little bit more on that, through the book, we have identified themes. And actually the stories in the book are not sorted by alphabetical order or anything else. It's just like themes that people work on. So we have some group of people that are working for, are heroes on entrepreneurship or women empowerment or some other social issues. Some of the people are leaders in NGOs. So we try to cover different social issues through the book and collectively map the contribution from people that are not necessarily Chinese and they're not necessarily born here, but they have contributed massively to Hong Kong. So that's the idea of the book.
I think also one of the things that is interesting is that actually in this call we found one of our volunteer, who's called Carol. She is also a volunteer. We are very surprised that there are so many Hong Kongers who are very committed, actually very passionate in helping us. At the start, we thought that this will be just like a book and we will like finish it and then, okay, done. But then once we start like spreading the words, there are actually a lot of people say, oh, do you want help? Do you need help? I can refer you to this person. And there's still a lot of connections that we never expect. And Hong Kong it's kind of, it's being described as they're less human as before. And actually, I feel that in this project, I found the human side of Hong Kong again, especially like not just local Hong Kong, but like different types of Hong Kongers. They just come and help us, which is a very surprising thing for me when I also shared this phenomenon to my friends and family. They were also very surprised by this. So it's like a small surprise for us to realize that in the project.
Can I ask Carol, would you like to say a couple of words?
Oh, hi, I didn't expect that. I'm actually having my dinner after the kind of smoke. So can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I think it's actually a great project. I happened to find that I don't remember, like hands-on or something, and I find it's very interesting because some of you might know that I lead local cultural tour on and off, and I always see Hong Kong and introduce Hong Kong to foreigners, to tourists, to people from outside Hong Kong or from the outside world, let me call it that way. But it's actually funny that we never thought of people who are in Hong Kong from other countries, what they have done to the society, what they have brought us to the community, and they just spend their whole life here, like I just mentioned. So I'm very privileged to join the project, see how all the information interview gathering together, and now it's finally published. And yeah, I'm just very proud to be part of the team.
Thank you very much.
Right. So yeah, yeah. So thank you for inviting.
It's our pleasure. Okay, we have. Let me talk a little bit about the next steps, because okay, now we have published the book. So what? So we're going to start organizing exhibitions in ideally local places. I mean, we still have to do a book launch, so you guys are welcome whenever we will share with you whenever we do that. But we want to start organizing exhibitions. We have organized 2 photo exhibitions already. This is one of them in Baptist University. So with all of our portraits and a little blurb about the stories, we want to showcase, like we group people from different topics that they represent. So it's been quite successful. And we want to do some talks around these exhibitions and everything. So anything we can do in public spaces to get the word out and spread our message of diversity in Hong Kong. And we're also preparing a guide, an educational guide to go with the book for teachers to use the book in an educational environment. And we will eventually start doing the 2nd volume of the book. So we have 80 nationalities, and our goal is to reach the total number of nationalities that are represented in Hong Kong, which we estimate it will be like 150. So coming up next, there will be the second volume of the book. And I think that's about it. Anything else, Aggie?
Oskar, can you tell us who do you pick for the China's representative? I think it's quite interesting.
Okay, so we have here the interview. We got in touch with Alan Seaman. We tried through the book to have a balance, right? Because I mean, we did the book in a very special moment for Hong Kong with the diversity of political views and opinions, and so we tried to find representatives on different areas. And also because he's a millionaire. During the interview, we talk a lot about money and his motivation in life. We try to make the interviews very personal, right? So in this case, we talk about how he just loved to make money. And so Alan Seaman was born in Canada, but then he got the PRC passport. So he's Chinese, so he will be the representative for China. So for every page of the book, we want to break stereotypes of who people would assume that that person is from, or the type of person that is, right? We have a lot of stereotypes about people, and that is not helping to bring us together, right? If our final goal is to bring people together, then we need to break those stereotypes and look at things from another perspective, right? So yeah, it was a very fun interview, and we did the photo shoot on the spot, and yeah, they gave us 3 hours. It was quite nice. I mean, we interview people from all kinds, right? So and also we kept aside a little bit our political opinions or anything. We try to be all the time in a very balanced, neutral state. We have here also, we're interviewing Olina from the Ukraine, and her daughter is very active in the yellow movement in Hong Kong. So also during this interview, we were talking about the Ukraine and the Soviet Union and all the story, but yeah, we try to balance a little bit different political opinions or any other opinions of any kind, to give this positive message of unity. That's the idea.
Thank you, Oskar. So maybe now I'll pass the time to Zamira, which is one of the interviewee of the book. And Zamira, I've known her for a few years, and she's also a third tent singer and also a communication officer at Enrich. So she'll tell you a little bit about how she came to Hong Kong and what's her experience here.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Benita. I don't have any slides, so I hope you guys don't mind if I just talk, but happy to share today a little bit about myself, about my participation with the Dear Hong Kong project, about where I'm from, and also about my work in Hong Kong. So when I first met Oskar, it was at an event over Chinese New Year, and he was asking me where I was from, and it's always a very complicated question to be asked where I'm from. It's always a question where I have to gauge, okay, is this going to be a long conversation or a short conversation? And so yeah, I told Oskar where I was from, and he was very excited. And he said, "Do you want to be part of the Dear Hong Kong project representing Bahrain?" Now, that was quite difficult initially for me. I actually spent quite a while trying to convince Oskar that I shouldn't be involved in representing Bahrain. And the reason for that is because I'm ethnically Indian, and I was born and raised in Bahrain, which if you have never heard of it, is totally fine. It's a tiny island in the Middle East, just off the coast of Saudi Arabia. It's its own country though. It has a population of about 1.5 million. It's very small. That's where I was born and grew up. But although Bahrain is amazing, if you go visit, it's got beautiful people, beautiful food, especially my favorite. The food is incredible. It's very well known for its traditional crafts like gypsum carving and pottery and textile weaving and basket making and boat making, things like that. And although Bahrain is a big part of my story, my family, and even the ethnic community I come from, I'm not Bahraini. And I never grew up thinking of myself as Bahraini. That's because in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries, even though you might be born there, even though like my parents, you might have lived there for 40, 45 years, you will never be given citizenship of that country. So I was born there, but I do not have Bahraini citizenship. So it is quite a difficult experience, really, and it's a difficult, complicated identity to answer the question, where are you from? I think what I loved about being part of Dear Hong Kong was that was actually something that Oskar and Aggie wanted to highlight. That was something that they embraced, this idea of different types of identity, of complex types of identity, and breaking down the stereotypes that get associated with different countries. So in that sense, I was really honored. I was actually really proud to be able to represent Bahrain. For me, it was something that was finally an accepted and acknowledged part of my identity, one that I'm not often allowed to acknowledge. So for me, that was very special. What was also special was to be able to talk about the work that I do in Hong Kong and what motivates me. I'm especially, I feel quite strongly about minority rights, about different cultures, about minority voices, and also about women's empowerment. Those are things that influence, possibly because of my background, influence a lot of what I do today. So when I moved to Hong Kong in 2012, I moved here initially to study and I stayed here to work. Hong Kong, actually, I'd never been to Hong Kong. I hadn't even been to this side of the world before at all. But Hong Kong felt very familiar to me. I was actually moving here from the UK, from London, where I'd been for about 5 years. I didn't really feel like I fit in there. I feel like London has a lot of cultures, but not a lot of them talk to each other. And if they do, they spend so much time not understanding each other. And I really struggled with that. So I'd spent 5 years either trying to explain who I was or just giving up on explanations. And then I arrived in Hong Kong and it felt so familiar. There was so much that was an aha moment for me. Asian culture, Chinese culture actually, has quite a lot of similarities with Indian culture. I'm also a third culture kid. So in Hong Kong, I'm quite racially ambiguous. So people will think I'm from, African countries, from the Caribbean, from America, from the UK. And in Hong Kong, there are a lot of people like me who have, many different ethnic mixes or come from different countries or grown up in Hong Kong. So in that sense, I found something quite familiar also. I also found in Hong Kong, something that was quite familiar was the very obvious privilege that you can see in Hong Kong. And that often has to do with race and with ethnicity. And the reason that's so familiar to me is because growing up in Bahrain, you know, I had a wonderful childhood and I had a lot of different opportunities and experiences. But something that was very glaringly obvious was, it's a little better now, but when I was growing up, it was a bit worse. It was the idea of how different your experiences could be based on the color of your skin. So for example, if you were white, if you were, you know, white from the UK or American or Australian, you probably got paid 3 times or 4 times the salary what my parents would get paid to do the same job. What that accordingly then meant is you then got to go to certain types of schools that I would never have been able to go to. You drove certain types of cars, you lived in certain areas. So I grew up with a kind of accepted understanding of that privilege. It just is what it is. And when I came to Hong Kong, it was here, you know, very prevalently so. So I was like, I know this, okay. And then the last thing that really I found I understood in Hong Kong was the experience of the ethnic minority community here. I'd grown up in Bahrain, like I said, with a wonderful life, but also when I left Bahrain, realized how much I wasn't allowed access to. For example, I wasn't allowed access to local politics, to learn the local language, to really integrate locally. And that's something that a lot of ethnic minorities in Hong Kong actually really connect with too. I can't really speak for the ethnic minority community here because they have so much more to say than I would be able to say for them, but it's such a rich community, such a diverse community. There's so much history there. And there's also so much pain and so much suffering because they're often a community that has been left behind and that has trickled down to the way they are treated and the opportunities that they have today. This is something that I obviously can't entirely connect with because I haven't had those experiences, but I can connect with some of the remnants of that. You know, I have experienced that racism that a lot of, you know, the ethnic minority community here go through, whether it's, you know, I've been turned down for a job because on the phone I sounded great, but when they met me in person, oh, I wasn't British. And when, you know, I go pretty much every single time I've moved house, almost every single time I've moved house, I've been rejected for houses because the landlord doesn't want the flat to smell like curry or, you know, whatever it is. You know, I've had a lot of those experiences, but the ethnic minority and community in Hong Kong have had that for way longer and worse even, you know. And because of the work I do, I've always been passionate about working with minority communities. I've worked with the refugee community in Hong Kong. I've seen, aside from the struggles that they already face because of the experiences they've gone through, they do experience difficulties in Hong Kong because of their race and ethnic background, because of their difference, essentially. And that can be quite a shock to the system. It can be quite hard for them to get over, many of whom are already struggling with trauma, with post-traumatic stress disorder, with depression or anxiety already. And now I work with domestic worker communities. So as Benita mentioned, I work at Enrich. Enrich is a charity in Hong Kong working with migrant domestic workers, and we provide financial and empowerment education to the domestic worker community here. This is something that is very special to me because I personally believe quite strongly in women's empowerment, in independence, in the power that financial education can provide. What we do is we equip domestic workers in their own languages, so in Tagalog and Bahasa Indonesia, with the tools to be able to take control of their finances, bearing in mind that most of them are women, and women in these cultures are typically not raised to think of themselves as breadwinners, but domestic workers often are. And we give them the tools to take control of their finances and then to be able to achieve whatever goals it is they want to achieve. So to get out of debt, to make a plan for the future, and to create long-term impact for themselves and their families, and to break the cycle of debt and financial struggle, and essentially to envisage a life beyond domestic work. So whatever those goals are that they have for themselves and their families, whether it's to buy a house or to buy land or to set up a business or to go back to school themselves, to put their children to school, those are the goals that we give them the tools to decide for themselves and to work towards as well. This is a community that doesn't have it easy in Hong Kong, especially during this pandemic. There's been a lot of challenges they faced, many of which are financial. You know, we met a domestic worker the other day who was supporting 9 people at home during COVID-19, 9 people on a domestic worker's salary. Yeah, we're seeing domestic workers who are taking out loans to be able to get through this time. People who have domestic workers who've lost jobs because their employers have been terminated, of course, and who then have loans themselves. So the guarantors for their loans, who are also domestic workers, are being called on. And so what's happening right now is having a knock-on effect on this community. And this is when financial education becomes all the more important and all the more empowering to be able to get through a situation like we're facing right now. But if you want to know more about our work, by the way, please do visit our website, enrichhk.org, and you can learn more about the programs we run and ways in which you can support as well. But to come back to the project, to Dear Hong Kong, I really do believe that this is why projects like this, so platforms like this and projects like this are extremely important. I don't think my story is extraordinary at all. I'm a South Indian girl from the Middle East who turned up in Hong Kong, and I'm working with the minority community here. For me, that's not extraordinary. That's perfectly normal. But I think these platforms are important to be able to tell these stories because, you know, we call Hong Kong Asia's world city, right? And that's a very proud label to bear. But we need to have something to back that up. And something that I've found is often we're uncomfortable with approaching the difficult, concepts of discrimination or racism, especially in corporate environments. There's a lot of discomfort in approaching these topics. The thing is, I don't really agree with slapping happy labels on things like Asia's World City and melting pot and all of this stuff, because I think we need to be able to have those difficult conversations to get through to the point where we earn those labels. So I think having a platform like this allows us to move from this idea of a melting pot where we're all this like melted down, similar goopy mess. I don't really agree with that concept. And move towards more this idea of a salad bowl. So this is the concept of Jane Elliott, who's like an anti-racism advocate and an educator in the US. She runs this fantastic experiment that made waves in the 80s, I think, of blue eyes and brown eyes. So do look it up, Jane Elliott. She had this concept called the salad bowl, where she's like, why should we be a melting pot when we should all be the same thing? We should be a salad bowl where you have the lettuce and the corn and the onions and the peppers and the chicken, and everything lends their own flavor, and all the ingredients have integrity, and they all make up one dish. This is what I think projects like this do. It allows people like me to tell perfectly ordinary stories, which I might not have had the opportunity to do otherwise. It also allows me to tell you the story of many of our domestic workers, which they're not here to be able to tell you this story. So I'm really grateful to be part of this project, and I hope you go away and buy the book and look at all the ingredients we have in this dynamic city, because I think there's a lot that we can do to work towards more inclusive Hong Kong. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zamira. I totally agree that I think a lot of us are not easy to discuss like racism. Like I am recently doing a training with a law firm, and when we talk about this, they tend to be very sensitive. You can't really, we need to be very careful when you discuss Black Lives Matters. I think in general, we are not very trained to have those very difficult conversations about race and what that implies. So yeah, thanks. And I have a question for Oskar and Aggie. So I'll start asking first. So what is the biggest challenge you have for doing this project?
Well, I mean, we started this project in some difficult times, right? So Hong Kong was going through very convulsive times, and we were not really equipped at the very beginning with obvious tools to do a project like this. I mean, we never did the book before. We don't have a degree in journalism. We don't we like photography, but we don't know much about it. We didn't know anything about publishing. So I think the whole project was fueled by passion. So our determination to do something like this. Of course, I mean, during these times, meetings were canceled, people were flying away from Hong Kong. There were many challenges, but I think everything was backed up by not only our own passion and determination, but also the amount of people that we got surrounded with. So people like Carol, and also our heroes, like we call Zamira and the other interviewees, call them heroes, because I mean, they help us to, whenever there was a problem or any questioning of, oh, wow. We did an interview on the TV, and they told us, like, do you have a journalism background? Like, people sometimes question, like, why are you doing something like this? Or even, like, it took us a while to prove that we were legit. Like, we were not kind of following any obscure agenda of anything. It was just like purely to create the social impact, no? So at the beginning, we had to work hard to share with people that the message was like clean. It was like, okay, yes, we just want people to understand each other more. And sometimes in this society, unfortunately, people may not understand that. It's like, oh, you should have economic drive.
Economic or political agenda.
Do things, yes. You need to have something. But I think once we pass that threshold, then we would only get love from people. Like, it was amazing. Like, I could see, like, whenever we share about our project, people got happy and always wanted to share things. And so I think we have been able to create, manage to get a little community of like-minded people that are also aligned with our goal. That's really good. It feels really good. I'm going to put here in the, because I realized I didn't put our website. So if people are more interested.
Any questions from the group here? Maybe from, I don't know, any questions from Anthony, Anthea, Jasmine? So Aggie, I have a question for you. So you talk about like being a Hong Konger overseas and like understanding this different culture diversity. Like how often do the concept of identity came out in your book? Like how people feel their own identity in this Dear Hong Kong project?
Actually, quite often, because we have a lot of representatives who is a third culture kid, or even like they live and born and have a different passport and is a mixed race. So whenever we ask them, so some people will ask us, oh, how do you choose the country, or like how do you get the people to choose which country they represent? And then we usually, when we ask the interviewee, we will say, oh, which one do you feel most comfortable with? So which one do you represent? Like, it doesn't necessarily to be like how it looks or where you're born or like the longest duration that you stay in a certain country. So I think that's also one of the way that how we kind of get people to be happy to open up to us. Yeah, sometimes sometimes I know the one of the thing that we often hear from people is like they kind of reflect about their own lives when they share with us, because it's not a common thing that for people to tell us, okay, share with me your story and like what do you think about your identity or your home, what do you appreciate about your own culture. And then when we listen for like maybe sometimes can be like up to 3 hours, and then people at the end we become friends and they will say, oh, thank you for like listening, and we also learn a lot from them. So I think identity, we try not to make it into like a political thing, but more like appreciation and also understanding.
Yeah, I think even those from Hong Kong, a lot of us maybe who lived and work in different countries to have the concept of identity might be difficult as well. So and yeah, how do you distill that 3 hours of interview into like a short 1 page on your book? How do you choose which element to include?
Actually, it takes us more than half a year to decide like how we should write it in the book, because there are so many interesting stories from maybe even just 1 hour conversation. And then we kind of have to debate and ask for like people who have written books before to see what will kind of catch people's heart and mind. So because sometimes there are a lot of stories that we feel very interesting, but maybe it's actually not related to the identity or like the Hong Kong part. So we'll have to kind of like discuss what we should put in. But at the end, we decided that one of the most important thing is we want to show to people that the contribution of each people to Hong Kong, or what they how their culture like contribute to Hong Kong, or at the same time how they learn from Hong Kong's culture.
I think at the same time is like we're trying to actually dig into who these people really are. Because, you know, like oftentimes we try to give a persona, like a profile to people is how we want to be seen, but it's sometimes different on who we really are. And we had the very intimate interviews, so there like the real person came up and their goals and the dreams and everything. So that was always like, I think in almost 100% of the cases it was very inspiring. So the challenge was, okay, how to translate that into words, especially in such a small space because it's in English and Cantonese, and how to create the same feeling that we had in the interview for the reader. That was challenging. I want to add up, if we have time, to the previous question, because I think during this talk with the different people, we digged into a little bit into the Hong Kong identity. So what makes Hong Kong people special? And I think sometimes it takes somebody from outside to tell you, like, okay, this is special about you. I mean, you maybe take it for granted because you think it's normal, but it's not normal. It's just like, that's you. And, you know, we have been talking about some racism or something, but also we discovered as one of the key elements is like the purity of the heart and the kindness of Hong Kong people and respect for others, which they are the two things that are happening at the same time, but I think it's very precious. Like people in Hong Kong should be proud of that.
Yeah, I just want to add to that as well, is like one of the things I love about Hong Kong is that idea of like is it the lion rock spirit, like that, just that hard work, perseverance, that's, you know, and also the I don't think I've ever been in a place which is so politically conscientious. Like I've never been in a city or a place where I can have intelligent conversations on politics with teenagers. You know, I think that's something I absolutely love about Hong Kong, is how engaged the community is in so many ways, and that's something I find really special here. Just to add to what Oskar was saying.
So with that, Anthony has a question. So maybe Aggie or Oskar can understand. I think you guys touched upon the lion rock spirit and the value, but how will you describe Hong Kong culture? It's a hard one. Is it the melting pot or the salad bowl or something else?
Interesting. So the question is Hong Kong culture or Chinese culture?
Hong Kong culture.
Chinese culture.
Hong Kong culture. Very specific.
Go Aggie.
What about the food?
But Anthony, in which sense do you mean Hong Kong culture? Like what we were talking about the things that make Hong Kong people unique, or?
I was can I share a story? I was in the hardware store a week or so ago, and I was talking to the lady there that runs the hardware store for us, and we were talking. She said to me, "You're lucky. You have somewhere else to go. You have another passport." And there was myself and a French guy at the counter with her, talking to her, and the French guy said, "Yeah, but we're still here. We're still in Hong Kong, when we could be somewhere else. We're here because we love Hong Kong and we love the culture of Hong Kong." the culture of Hong Kong it's so unique to me from the many different places I've been to around the world that I fell in love with this. It's so difficult to describe. It is a community of it's encompassing. It's all encompassing. We live in a little old village, Mui Wo, in the back of Mui Wo, Sun Long Wai, and there's the elder Uncle Lee out the front here. He has the house on the corner there. He knows what's going on. What did I say? How would you describe Hong Kong culture? Hong Kong culture to me is this sense of community that is unique to this place compared to anywhere else I've been. It's not Chinese. I've lived and worked in Chinese for a number of years. It's nothing like the Chinese culture. It has an internationality or I don't know. Could you describe to me from your interviews what you may think?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I think some people did mention to us that actually it's for some locals or some people, it's a problem that like expat foreigners, mainly Chinese, ethnic minorities, they live in their own bubble and seems like they don't interact with each other. But at the same time, a lot of people also mentioned to us that it's very okay for people to live in their own bubble in Hong Kong and not to interact with each other and have like a very comfortable life for themselves. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, the common answer from people, there was like, in Hong Kong, you can be whoever you want to be. So actually you can, it's one of the few places in the world that you can find your own spot, whatever that is. So that it's easy, but it's not the salad that...
I do also want to sort of slightly challenge this idea of a Hong Kong culture, because I think maybe more what you're asking about is a Hong Kong identity. But I think when you're talking about culture, there are so many cultures in Hong Kong. It's where people often think of, when you say Hong Kong culture, they're like, oh, you know, Chinese culture. But actually, there are so many Hong Kongers who are not ethnically Chinese, who have been here longer, generation-wise, than some of the Hong Kong Chinese families have. You know, and they, you know, who's more Hong Konger than the other? I think it's more, if you're talking about a Hong Kong identity, that's a question for depending on where you live, who you interact with, your experiences, and the opportunities that you have, I think. But in terms of Hong Kong culture, personally, I don't believe there is one.
No, fair point.
So another question. So I think this question is from Jasmine. So maybe I'll direct this to Zamira. So third culture kit seems to be a trendy term. How do you see this trend?
It's a term that when I found out about it, gave me a bit of relief, because I was like, oh, there's a word, you know, there's a phrase. That's great. You know, I mean, if you're not familiar with the term, it's this idea of someone who is raised with one type of culture within the context of a different culture, and that basically creates a third culture. So, you know, I was raised in an ethnically Indian household, and you know, to be honest, where the community I come from is such a minority that we defy all the stereotypes of Indians. We're not even, if you go Indian and you go, are you this, I'm none of those things. So you know, you can see my surname, for example, is Portuguese. So like, I think usually when people hear about my culture, they are confused because they made certain assumptions. And then I was raised in the Middle East amongst an Arab culture, but also a very diverse community, because Bahrain is quite diverse. So there's that culture. And then that creates an identity for myself. So amongst, if I go to India, amongst Indians there, I'm quite foreign. And if I go to non-Indians, then I'm quite Indian, or quite any other ethnicity they think I am. So for me, that creates sort of an in-between mixed world. And it is becoming quite common. You see it a lot in Hong Kong. There are a lot of young people here who, you know, who have been here for, you know, their parents have moved here, or their grandparents or their great-grandparents. And so they have a mixed identity where they grow up with one type of culture at home, and then there's a dominant culture outside. And they have to find a way to engage and connect with each other. So they set up their own set of rules aside from that. It's quite common for third culture kids to be able to code switch, you know, where you switch languages or terms depending on who you're talking to. My accent changes when I talk to my family drastically. It changes when I talk in environments like this because I have to make myself understood. The words I use change, the types of references I make change. So in that sense, like it's really, really common. And I think, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. For me, actually, in Hong Kong, I find there's actually more acceptance of this kind of ambiguity than there is in other places in some ways. I don't know if that really answered your question, but I hope it did.
I think for us, I mean, we encounter so many of these third world kids, and I think I would totally agree that it's a plus. So it's, I mean, whenever people, I think it's the embodiment of the message that we try to get through. So you put different cultures in yourself, and you're totally unapologetic about it. It's like, yes, this is me. This is, and it's amazing. It's like the sum of different cultures is something super positive. And we see that like people are not, because people used to be like, oh yeah, sorry, I'm telling you I'm from Hong Kong, but obviously you're going to ask me another question and then I need to, but no, it's just like, yes, I'm from Hong Kong and I may look different, but that's the reality in Hong Kong, and it's okay.
Very good questions. Anybody else? I don't know, Jan, Winnie, Shuke have a questions for our guests? Oh, we got a question. Jasmine, thank you for thoughts. Okay. So Oskar, you said you want to use this in some of the education tool in the school. And how do you think it's best to promote it? So I think Aggie mentioned in Hong Kong, our local school, we don't talk much about race. We don't talk about culture. So what's the best way to talk about these topics? Have you thought about that with your team?
Well, I mean, it is true that people follow a curriculum, and it seems like there is no way to bring something different or this kind of reflections on the table. But that said, I think we have identified a few teachers that are really resonating with what we're doing, and we want to find more, and we want to collectively create this guide that we have already started, and it looks very good, no, with different activities and everything, and reflections on the book. It could be under different subjects, right? So you can use this book even as a starter for a history lesson or geography or even any of the social issues that are touched in the book, or even to talk about racism or any other social topic. So yes, I mean, we still need to contact more people in the educational background. So if anybody from the audience knows somebody or even like because like we made it such a collective project that we are always eager to get inputs from people. So if anybody in the audience know about somebody that could open up some doors to some exhibition in a local setting, then we're more than happy to collaborate. So yes, and likewise for teachers that may be more liberal, more resonating with these topics, then they would like them to get involved and help us to bring it to as many people as we can.
Very good. So I know there's some good people in this group. So may not be the teachers, it can be a student group or in university or secondary, whatever that is. So yeah, and any further questions from the group? Or people are ready for the Monday night drink?
Also, if people are interested in the book, then they can enter the link that I put there, and they can buy the book, pick it up from different locations in Hong Kong, or recommend to friends if they feel like it could be interesting for them.
Yeah, yeah. I think if if it's a very good introduction book to the wonderful diversity in Hong Kong, and I saw it in Booker and everywhere. So if any of you need to explain what is Hong Kong culture to other people, or Hong Kong's really amazing diversity, I think that's really good. If not, just share the website to them, share a story. So with that, I think I'll close the evening. So thank you, Oskar, thank you, Aggie, thank you, Zamira, and for everybody joining here. If you have a question to Oskar, to Zamira, of them, please feel free to reach out to us on Facebook or send us an email. We'll link you with them. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I hope you enjoyed today's sharing, and thanks for being with us. So everybody have a good evening, and have a wonderful new year, and hopefully a better 2021 ahead. It has been very rough on everybody, I know. So good night, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much, Benita.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.